Section 368 deleted. Rough note. This section is also deleted from the regular records, since it deals with personal material. Jane began speaking at a rather fast rate, with her eyes closed, as she sat on the divan. Seth said, the overconscious self is also extremely powerful, driven by remarkable amounts of energy. When both portions of the personality are in agreement, then Rupert's personality is literally overwhelming, filled with vitality and unbeatable. The energy of the overly conscious self is as strong as that of the spontaneous self, hence the impasse that had been reached. He can only go full steam ahead when the whole personality is convinced of his course, for the personality knows full well the tremendous force of its own energy potential, and it would be literally disastrous for one portion to go ahead at the expense of the other. Therefore, regardless of present consequences, one portion has been kept down in order to avoid any serious, that is disastrous, cleavage. The overconscious self is protecting the whole personality against what it considered evil. It can be re-educated. There is a cleavage apparent in Rupert's distaste of the word God. For example, in Catholic terms, he consecrates himself to God as a child deity. He has done so against, but without admitting the fact. There is some difficulty here. Not necessarily a blockage, but a misunderstanding. We shall have to clear it up later. The message, Rob notes the contents of the last session. Seth said so far has reached the superconscious self. It is not kicking up a fuss so much as hesitating in caution. It was the spontaneous self who kicked up the fuss this afternoon, thinking, hurry, 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 see things my way. Rob knows when Jane tried to work on the dream book unsuccessfully. Seth said, now, when you make love to him, assure him of your emotional love and concern and affection. In the beginning, stress this, and lull him. He needs to be quiet first through words and caresses. Use the word husband often, reminding him of your realistic relationship. And emphasize also the connection between emotional and mystic love that you share. You, as teacher in this love relationship now, can count oddly enough on the passivity of his nature, and play on this. For then, assured, reassured, the superconscious self can allow the spontaneous self to emerge in the sex relationship. He suspends his periods. He is neither pregnant nor beginning the menopause. This was a biological activity he felt he could safely suspend, and in doing so, avoid further conflict. The conflict caused by enjoyment in sex, when he did not feel worthy of being loved. You can be stern here, again counting on his passivity in the love relationship. Reassurances, gentle strokings. We will have to add more here also later. He feared his mother prowled the house during darkness. This also accounting for some of the sleep difficulty. Last night's poor sleep and the symptoms were simply a reaction to the information given in last night's session, and represent a momentary stiffening of position by both sides of the personality. For both, felt equally guilty for the physical predicament and were acting self-defensively. There was literally a psychological sense of shock. The autobiographical material produced as novels by Ruber were also helpful as safety valves. An integration is already beginning to take place, however, since last evening's session. Patience rather than coercion should be used. Ruber's spontaneous self should not push. Relief will be more immediate if a persistent, soft cell line is used. The old neighborhood has enclosed him, and he must now truly escape its limitations while using the psychic potential of his experience as an integrating power. It is also responsible, you see, for the remarkable potential that he has. He does not feel free to use his full energy until all portions of the personality are convinced of the goodness of his purpose. There were deeply significant roots to his relationships with the various priests that had almost magical connotations to him and his psyche. A submerged mixture of mysticism and sex. I will myself attempt to communicate with Father Ryan, who is now much less rigid than he was, and this may help. He can himself communicate to Ruber through his dreams, and clear up many confused issues. Father Trainer will also be of assistance to us, I am sure. Now, you see Ruber has accepted you as an extension of the super-conscientious self, and your word was added to the taboos already set up. Therefore, a mystical import, a magical import, was given to your every word. When your word disagrees with his spontaneous self, severe conflicts arose. This is important. You were through your art, however, also connected to his spontaneous self. Originally, you saw Ruber as the spontaneous self, and your ideas of discipline were quickly gobbled up by the overly conscientious self before you recognized its existence. The overly conscientious self is the part that will retreat, that carries grudges, that believes an eye for an eye, and is relatively uncompromising. It must be made to understand that the spontaneous self is innately good and can be trusted. It needs to be lovingly protected, but lovingly, not hindered, nor fought, nor held down. Both portions, however, have great capacities for survival, and are each strong, so that the personality has indeed survived. There is a need for the spontaneous self to understand the purpose of the conscientious self also. Ruber has wanted you to rub him for the sake of physical contact and reassurance, this being more than acceptable to both portions. He was made to feel unworthy and unwanted by his mother, and it was the spontaneous self who took the brunt of this. He feels therefore rejected by any family group. The grandfather was as rigid in his way as the grandmother. He was afraid of his own thoughts as a child, believing that thoughts could kill. The unspoken bitterness against his mother built up inside him. He considered it wrong, and could not release it. Hence, the Pollyanna attitude at times a desperate attempt to cover up thoughts that are spontaneous, but that are considered evil by the conscientious self. Always a strong trend and ability for high dedication. The conflict mentioned in last evening's session was a barrier to dedication. He felt lost without the dedication, and it robbed his days of meaning. He has always seen his daily life in the context of eternal meaning, and the conflict preventing this, robbing him of the previous significance possessed by the most trivial incident. He was no longer certain of his course. Do you have questions? Rob asked, could you address yourself directly to his conscientious self if you wanted to? Seth said, I have. Rob asked, did it acknowledge your communication? Seth said, it has. I am permitted to speak because the superconscientious self is aware of and convinced of my moral standing, you see? Rob asked, can the conscientious self construct its own dreams? Seth said, does it construct some dreams? Rob said, yes. Seth said, it participates in the construction of some dreams having a more or less important role according to some circumstances. Punishment can be meted out in dreams, you see, but also moral encouragement can be given in dreams. Rob asked, but these moral encouragements could conflict with the spontaneous self even in dreams? Rob said, indeed, if as here the superconscientious self has a limited concept. Rob asked, is Rupert tired tonight? Seth said, the 2 sessions have wearied him some, but will overly be highly advantageous. Rob asked, do you think his projections will improve now? Seth said, indeed, an improvement has already begun. Some realization has come to the overly conscientious self, even before last night's session, or the session itself would have been much more difficult. Rob asked, has the spontaneous self ever been responsible for any of the symptoms? Seth said, very seldom. It should be remembered that the overly conscientious self is also responsible for lifelong continuity of purpose, giving direction to the spontaneous self. Rob asked, could you think of the conscientious self as a more basic ego structure than the spontaneous self? Seth said, it is deeper than an ego structure. The ego structure is formed from both, with a surface veneer of superficial characteristics. The spontaneous self represents basic abilities. The superconscientious self represents the purpose to which these abilities will be put, how and when they shall be used. The superconscientious self is the motivation power or purpose. Rob said, yes. Well, if Rupert's tired, we can end the session now. Seth said, the 2 sessions, one immediately following the other, you see, both should be highly beneficial, however. Rob said, yes. Seth said, I will bid you good evening and I will discuss your tremor and some other matters at our next session. Rob said, good night, Seth. Rob notes, Jane still lay flat, quite unusual for her. She was not aware of any resistance, she said. Her eyes were closed much of the time, her voice slow and quiet, her manner rather tired.